Hello and welcome to another edition of Know Your Schools on WISD TV. My name is Dale Caffey and my very special guest is Cheryl Pooler. Cheryl is the homeless liaison at Waco ISD. We're going to talk about the homeless population because a lot of people at home don't think about the fact that we serve a lot of kids who are considered homeless. Talk about where we are right now.
Our numbers have gone down some, trying to understand what that's about, but hopefully it's a good thing in that we're connecting, doing a better job of connecting families to resources, and families are beginning to move into more permanent housing situations long term.
When you think of the term homeless, you're thinking the person out who's living under a box on the street. That's not really the definition. It's all defined by the McKinney-Vento Act. Is that correct?
That's
if you could
correct.
Talk about and educate us on McKinney-Vento.
Yes, most of us are more familiar with what would be the HUD's definition of homelessness, and that applies more to adults. McKinney-Vento is specific federal legislation that applies to school-age children, and it identifies homelessness as children who are not living in stable housing. Their housing has to be fixed, adequate, and regular. So when students are living doubled up with other families, which is a lot of our children because of economic hardship, they move around a lot when that happens, and so that creates a lot of instability for the family. That also includes children who are living in hotels or shelters. We do have 3 shelters in Waco that serve homeless children and families. Sally's House is run by the Salvation Army. Family Abuse Center provides services to victims of domestic violence, and Compassion Ministries provides transitional housing for families who are experiencing homelessness. So, and then also in that definition would include families who are living in hotels, which oftentimes families lose their housing and the first thing they do is go check into a hotel. For me, that ends up being a bit of a challenge, just because once you land in the hotel, you can't save money to move out of the hotel and then get secured permanent housing. And I encourage families to move into Compassion Ministries, or if they're qualifying for domestic violence services, something where their money is not just being locked up from week to week, but they can actually save money to reestablish housing.
You're talking about and describing some of the things you do as homeless liaison, but why don't you talk a little bit more about some of the things on your to-do list?
Sure. Also included in that list of homelessness are unaccompanied youth. And unaccompanied youth are any student who presents themselves to the district that are not currently living with someone who has legal or physical guardianship of them. So I call those kids, oftentimes they're considered couch surfers, would be kind of the slang term, but everybody knows what that means and what that's about. And we generally, I see up to 100 of students like that in the district, and there are lots of reasons why students find themselves in those situations. And they're still coming to school. And so McKinney-Vento law says that the student does have a right to stay in school even if they're not living with a legal guardian. And we are mandated by the McKinney-Vento law. There are some key provisions within that law to make sure that the child, or the student rather, is able to access services and remove all barriers to education. And so part of my job as a liaison and a social worker is I'm removing barriers to them. So I help with them accessing immediate enrollment. They qualify for free and reduced lunch. I assist students with uniforms and school supplies. And then ordering transportation is another very big activity that I do a lot of, just because my families are highly mobile and they're moving so much, and we want the child, and the federal law requires that the child has the right to stay in their school of origin. So wherever they're living at the time they become homeless, they can stay in that school. So no matter how many times they bounce around, they stay in that school of origin, which is generally a nurturing environment and familiar for the student. When things are unfamiliar at night and uncertain, there's something stable in the child's life. And the spirit of McKinney-Vento law was to provide that stability for the student.
Do you also try to track their success in school? Because even though these children who are homeless have distractions, and a lot of them, they're smart kids.
Yeah, homeless does not equal underperforming or low performing all the time. It can, and until we can really get resources connected, it often does. But once we've identified the student and can put some critical resources into the student's path, we're seeing some really terrific results. In the last 3 years, we have averaged over a 90% graduation rate for seniors who are coded as McKinney-Vento. The state average is less than 25% will graduate from high school, but Waco ISD is by far exceeding that, and we're very proud of that. And it's because of some of the resources that we're providing. Baylor School of Social Work partners with us, and we use School of Social Work interns, and they come to the high school campuses for their internship and meet with the students and help provide resources and connect them to resources and just walk alongside them. And Rita Pearson is someone that most of us in the education world are familiar with, but she left us with some dear parting words about every kid needs a champion, and that's what we are, especially for an unaccompanied youth. This child does not generally have a parent or someone intimately involved in their academic endeavors, and so our interns and our case manager Kathy Wigtel, we fill in that gap and stand in the gap for the student, and we're seeing a tremendous payoff.
Baylor interns, of course, helping us out and helping those students out, and in turn getting some great on-the-job experience too.
Absolutely, and then the district is hiring them when they graduate, which is something fun for me because I can reassure some of the campuses who I've worked with in their internship, and they've just done such great quality work. Baylor does a phenomenal job of preparing their interns, and it's just a win-win in the community.
I was reading some bullet points about what your department does, and there's something called SNAP. Can you explain what SNAP is?
Yeah, it's a federal program for a meal program, and it's a supplemental nutrition assistance program. And so it's basically, the old word would be food stamps or their benefits card. And students who are unaccompanied qualify for SNAP benefits, and with that they can also qualify for a medical card. Oftentimes what we would see is we would stumble across students on our high school campuses who are experiencing a lot of food insecurity and some health issues. They did not realize that they could still access health care. And so a SNAP representative from Caritas, who is bilingual, we make appointments and she comes to the campus and enrolls the student on site. It takes about 20 to 25 minutes versus the student needing to sign out for an entire day just to go to one appointment downtown at Caritas. And so Caritas has partnered with us, and I would say probably one of the greatest opportunities that I've had as a liaison is to really engage with the community and bring some of the community into the school to help our students. And that's one of the ways. Seventh and James Baptist Church partners with us on a uniform recycling program, because one of the key provisions of McKinney-Vento is we provide uniforms to students who are homeless. And McKinney-Vento, the government will say the school district has to do all of these things: uniforms, school supplies, transportation, meals, and all this stuff. But it's an unfunded mandate. And so we've been able to create avenues in the community where that information or those resources are given to our students, and everybody has what they need. And it's exciting for me as a social worker because it levels the playing ground for my kids. They come to school dressed like everybody else. They're clean, they're ready to learn, and that's what we want. At the end of the day, we want our kids to succeed. We want them to be if they're first generation, we want them to go as far as they can academically or with a trade of some sort. We want them to just exceed whatever they had experienced, possibly growing up.
Now, are some of the groups you talked about there members of the Homeless Coalition, or is the Homeless Coalition something separate that we're still part of?
We are part of the Homeless Coalition. Until just this month, I was president of the local Heart of Texas Homeless Coalition, and that is a group of about 25 to 30 agencies locally, and any agency who's providing resources to homeless individuals or families. They get together once a month and network, and we have presentations and guest speakers, and I'm still very active in the Homeless Coalition. And so that's something that has been very critical to Waco ISD for lots of reasons. One is we participate in a federal point in time count that helps us identify where needs are around homelessness in the community so that we can get increased funding from the federal government. And some of the unmet needs in our community are around housing for families and for unaccompanied youth. It's not uncommon for me to get a phone call from a family sleeping in their car, or they don't know where they're going to go that night. The shelters stay full. And so through the Homeless Coalition, we've been able to create some resources, a family housing collaborative that's going to provide emergency housing for families and get them and hopefully greatly reduce their time in homelessness. The shorter we can create that and make their time in homelessness as quick as possible, get them back into stable housing, the better the outcome will be. The longer they stay homeless, the harder it is to get things shored back up. And so we just want to try to really act quickly, swiftly, and keep things moving. And the other thing we've done, and it's actually been acknowledged by the Department of Education and HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development federal entity for housing, but we provide information to them about what our families' needs are. So as I'm dealing with families, they sign a permission or a release of information. I never release their personal identification. I only gather what kind of resources they're in need of. Most of the time they need safe, affordable housing. Mm-hmm. If it's an unaccompanied youth, they need some type of transitional housing or host home program where they have a safe place to go at night so that they don't fall victim to a life of crime or chronic homelessness, become a victim of human trafficking. I mean, there's all kinds of at-risk factors that come around this population. And so the Homeless Coalition has really partnered with us through the city of Waco and creating some desperately needed resources for families. That
information sharing with HUD was highlighted in a national newsletter that we're very proud of. The U.S. Department of Education, is it?
Yes.
Comes out with this called Interagency Data Disclosure, but this is a very widely read newsletter throughout the nation.
It went to every school district in the United States.
Right, and I have the tab marked here, a big write-up about Waco ISD and their data sharing with HUD, and you described some of that. You got to be proud of that.
Very proud, and I was invited to Washington, D.C. this summer to talk about that, and then a lot of other school districts are calling and have also begun the data sharing because they find themselves in the same position we are in. In Waco, 30% of our citizens are living in the poverty realm. And a significant percentage of our school students, school-age kids are, I think, almost around 90%. I think I'm pretty sure it's right around 90% of free and reduced lunch. Yes, so that is, anytime you have that level of need, then you're going to need resources to help offset that. And kudos to Terry Holtkamp at the City of Waco. It was her idea. One day we were just sitting having lunch and she said, what if we try this? And we drew up an MOU that could guarantee privacy and confidentiality for our students and families. And that MOU went all the way to Washington, D.C. and was vetted by the Department of Ed and HUD, and they gave it a thumbs up. And so it's a good thing that Waco's getting recognized for, but it's especially awesome that it's going to lead to more resources for families. If we can stabilize our families in poverty, we truly do have an opportunity to slow down and reverse this trend that we've seen in our community.
Another thing that you've been working on, and it's getting closer to become a reality, is something called The Cove, C-O-V-E, The Cove. Why don't you update our viewers on what that is and where we are in the process?
We have come a long way. This has been a dream of mine for 3, almost 4 years. The Cove is a safe haven and a refuge after school for unaccompanied homeless youth. At 3:30 or 4 o'clock when the bell rings, most kids are staring at their watch and they can't wait to go home. And if they're like my kids or yours, they come in hungry, they raid the refrigerator, they're getting comfortable and relaxing, and they have a safe place to go. But if you're an unaccompanied youth, that bell rings and you do not have anywhere to go necessarily, you're homeless, you honestly do not have a home. Maybe they can go stay at someone else's house for the night, but they're not going to get there until much later in the day. They traditionally, what I know is most of my kids who are couch surfing, they show up closer to bedtime. And so they're just kind of floating around the community, and we want to help provide a safe place for them. And so the Cove will provide them a place for showers and hot meals and access to technology and mentors. Some of our kids have been medically neglected just through certain life circumstances, but we can connect them to a medical clinic. We can connect them to mental health resources to deal with any mental health issues that are going on. Even legal issues will be resolved through the Cove. We're also going to address family reunification. If it's a safe decision and a good idea for that student to reunify with their family, we want to be a part of that and help bring in counseling and professionals who can help nurture that. Now, the Cove does exceed the scope of public school. And so it is not a Waco ISD entity. It is a private nonprofit, a 501c3, and we just filed for our 501c3 status. And there was a very loud cheer from my office that day because this has been a very long time coming. We're modeling our program after a program in Georgetown. They call their program the Nest. We'll be the Cove, but it's very similar to what Georgetown has seen some pretty wonderful success with. And then in addition to the Cove, looking at a host home model where at 8 o'clock when the Cove closes, there's a safe place for my kids to go and sleep in. I'm not talking about an emergency shelter. I'm actually talking about families who would welcome a child into their home and give them a bed to sleep in. I think one of the things that I see that our kids are desperate and hungry for and really need is the experience of a stable, loving, nurturing home environment. For lots of reasons, that's just not something that they've really had access to. And if we can give that to them through a host home model, much like a foster care program does, then I feel like that is and what I'm hearing from the kids is that's preferable to a shelter or some other opportunity. They would be more willing and excited at the opportunity of becoming part of a family. And they're like us. They enjoy their family. They want to be a part of a family. And so I feel hopeful that we can continue with this, and if I can get the Cove up and going, which we're just about there, I'm going to turn my energy onto the host home model, and we're going to continue to see lives changed.
Well, when it comes to energy, you have it, and you have a lot on your plate, and I appreciate the work you do at Waco ISD. You're very passionate about this.
I am, and it's an honor and a privilege for me to serve our families in the district. I fell in love with Waco 6 years ago, and I am just thankful and have a lot of gratitude that I'm here doing what I do.
Thank you, Cheryl Pooler, for being here on Know Your Schools. That will do it for this edition of Know Your Schools. My name is Dale Caffey, and I'll see you next time.